good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. You all seem so excited about this, and that makes me excited. My name is Colleen Shin. I am an outreach director at Autism Speaks, and I've been here for a little over 6 years. And before I worked here, I worked at an organization called Easter Seals for 18 years and was the director of 2 really big autism programs there. I've been in the disability community working directly mainly with people with autism, but all different disabilities for over 30 years, and was lucky enough to come to Autism Speaks once funding for my job and the programs that I ran at Easter Seals was unfortunately cut by the state. So that's what brought me here, and I'm in an outreach role. I do a lot of presentations. I do a lot of education and informing people of the resources that Autism Speaks has and all the good work that we do, because I think that a lot of people don't know about all the access and the free resources that we have through our services and supports that I'm part of. And so that's why I love doing these presentations. So thanks for the opportunity. And I will let Krista introduce herself too before we start.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Krista Stevens, and I am the Director of State Government Affairs for Autism Speaks. I'm not lucky enough to be based out of Minnesota. I'm based out of Dallas, but actually right now I'm in the capital. I'm in Washington, D.C. for some work. So I'm so glad I was able to come to you remote from a hotel room. The beauty of Zoom, I guess this is. But I'm gonna yes, I'm gonna let Colleen get started. She's gonna give you a nice overview of all the work that we do at Autism Speaks, and then I'm gonna talk more about the specific advocacy work that we do and how it can benefit individuals in Minnesota, in your community, and maybe how some of you can help.
Thanks, Krista. And then as people are coming, are you letting them in when they come in? Okay, I just want to make sure people were not just in the waiting room since we're co-hosts now. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. So this is Autism Speaks vision and mission statements. We changed these actually right when I started at Autism Speaks. We turned 10. And then in 2020, we turned 15. So we've gone through a lot of transformation in the time that I've been at Autism Speaks. And prior to coming here as a full-time staff, I was a really active volunteer. And I helped not just work at walks, but I did an early access to care initiative that was providing screenings for autism in underserved communities. I was co-chair of some of that, actually. I helped to author the early detection for signs of autism toolkit that we have. So I've done a lot of work with Autism Speaks, and I've really seen this shift, which has been very, very interesting, because I think we're moving and growing with the autism community, which is really important. So our mission statement and our vision statement are simple, but really do encompass the work that we do. So our vision is a world where people with autism can reach their full potential. And then you can see the mission statement, and I'll read this to you, but I also want to just point out a couple things about it. So Autism Speaks is dedicated to promoting solutions across the spectrum and throughout the lifespan for needs of individuals with autism and their families. We do this through advocacy and support, and you're going to hear from Krista today about a lot of that very specific work, increasing understanding and acceptance of people with autism, and advancing research into causes and better interventions for autism spectrum disorder and related conditions. So some things that are important about that are across the spectrum, because I can tell you, for as many years as I've been doing this work, the spectrum has broadened. It's gotten much more complex with the diagnostic criteria over the years. And so there's such a wide spectrum, and we really need to find solutions and services and supports for that entire spectrum. That's what we're striving to do as an organization. We also have a very big focus now for the lifespan. For the longest time, many autism organizations, including Autism Speaks in the very beginning, were really focused on that pediatric population and those early detection, early diagnosis, getting in there and doing early intervention. And we still are doing that. But we've also known now, and you probably know, and I'll mention this a little bit later, that autism, the prevalence rate is climbing all the time, including this last week. So all of these children who are diagnosed with autism are growing up to be adults. And we have to make sure that we're, as an organization, leading the charge to make sure that we're providing resources and different kinds of supports for that very important transition to adulthood, but also once they get to adulthood. That's really important to us. Another thing that really should stand out here is that, we're known as an organization that raises a lot of awareness. And we don't just do it in April when it's Autism Awareness Month, we do it year round. We also know that awareness isn't enough. So we actually wove into our mission and our vision statements that understanding and acceptance are as top of a priority for us as is awareness. I know that this past year in April, many organizations did change their name of autism to Autism Acceptance Month. Autism Speaks is keeping the awareness in our name, because if you don't have awareness, you really can't have acceptance and understanding. So we work on all three of those things, and that's something that's really important to us. And then I'll talk a little bit more about what we're doing with our 5 mission areas right here. These are our objectives. And as I kind of already mentioned, I'm just going to recap some of this, that we're really, really striving for that increase in global understanding and acceptance of autism. Awareness is important. We're keeping that in the front of mind, but we also know that understanding and acceptance is really important. And where does that come from? Education. So doing presentations like this is really important. So thank you again for letting us do this. We also have some very interesting research that's been going on at Autism Speaks for the past few years. We are no longer looking for a cure of autism. There have been a lot of different research studies where that was in the early days the focus of Autism Speaks, but throughout the years we have a really very interesting genomic sequencing program going on that looks at the genetic makeup of different families. And the reason that's so important is because we can look to see if there are similarities with patterns of those genetic predispositions, and then look at what ways can we personalize interventions for individuals. That's really important. We have those 2 main areas that I mentioned before, of that really increasing and staying on top of those childhood screening and timely interventions. So important. We can't give up on that. But then again, really improving that transition to adulthood, and really trying to create resources and information around that very specific topic. And then again, once we are in that transition phase, then what do we do? What about adult services? So we have a lot of focus on that as well, and I'll talk about that too. And then, I can tell you, when I very first met my first person with autism, I was working at a summer camp at the town that I grew up in, and it was 34, 36 years ago. And I went home and said to my mom, there's this little boy with autism at my camp, and I don't know what that is. And she said, well, let me go look. And we didn't have the computers back then. I know I feel really old telling that story, but we didn't have Google. So she went and got her pediatric encyclopedia out, and there was one page that was dedicated to what autism was. And one side of that page of the encyclopedia read autistic child, and the other side read Asperger's. And that was it. And I said, well, I want to learn more. And so she took me to the library, and there was like 2 articles that we could find at the library. So you can imagine, if you fast forwarded that situation to today, we would go to the internet, we would go to Google, we would look up autism, and we would be really overwhelmed with the amount of information that we would find. And so what we are striving to do as an organization is making sure that we can provide that access to reliable information and services, because there's so much information out there that it really can be very overwhelming for anybody that's associated with an autistic diagnosis. So that's something that's really important for us. We want people to know that we're an organization that people can come to for all different kinds of services, supports, information, and resources. So that's actually, again, moving into our mission objectives. That's really important to us. Okay, so this is really love this video. I'm going to start it. It's really only like a minute and a half long. I really like this, and I'll tell you why I like it when it's over. When I start it, if you can just give me a thumbs up that you can hear, that would be great.
When it comes to autism, Hi.
Finding the right words can be tough. Finding understanding doesn't have to be.
Say hi, Mom.
Hi, Mom. Hi, Mama.
Julian, I love you.
Love you too.
Close my eyes, I can see the world that's waiting for me.
You're so happy.
Together, we can create a kinder, more inclusive world for the millions of people on the autism spectrum.
Silly.
What if it's too hard?
I'm gonna push through.
What if it's too tough?
I'm gonna push through.
I am strong.
You have been accepted to Kutztown University.
But it feels like home.
Go to autismspeaks.org.
I always do that. So I love that video for a couple of reasons. First of all, it shows the lifespan. So you see really young children all the way up to an adult who was actually emceeing that spot that we have. So every single person on that video has autism, and they're at varying levels of the spectrum. So I really like that. You could see people who are communicating with voice output devices. That little boy with his voice output device who was pushing the buttons, and then a voice would come out, all the way to somebody who, like I said, was emceeing the entire thing. And that's someone who, excuse me, we partner with frequently. So I love that video. There's a lot of videos like that on our Autism Speaks website. That was just one of the PSAs that we ran when we turned 15 2 years ago. So I just wanted to share that with you. So I quickly had to change this slide this morning because last week the CDC announced a different prevalence rate for children with autism in the United States. And instead of 1 in 54, which was what we were reporting since 2018, actually, the number jumped to 1 in 44. We also, for the first time in 2020, the CDC, or the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, came out with adult prevalence rates, and those adult rates are 1 in 45, or 2.2% of the adult population, now 2.3% of the pediatric population. And we know that this is not just a common diagnosis in the United States. This is a diagnosis all over the world. And there are estimates through the United Nations that there are 70 million people that are affected on the autism spectrum worldwide, which makes our work so important. And I know people probably have a lot of questions about where did that 1 in 44 statistic come from. I could probably do an entire presentation just on that. This is also really new to me because Krista and I were traveling last week for work. And these numbers came out, I believe, on Friday. So this is all really new to us as well. But there's a really nice place on our website that explains how these numbers came to be. And there's the link here. So I can send you guys this presentation when we're done, and you can have that actual link. And I can also send a follow-up email with the live link so you guys can look it up, because it's really interesting to read about. But it just, it makes our work so much more significant and important, and why we do the work that we do, so we can provide important resources for this wonderful community. So finding resources, nice segue. We have a lot of different, like I said, resources and information that a lot of people don't know about. So please take advantage of all of these things and more that Autism Speaks offers. I will tell you that we have almost 50 toolkits that are like guidebooks that are super helpful. Those topics really range from, as I mentioned, that first concern to action toolkit, when people are wondering if there's something that might be going on with their child, or even an adult who's maybe thinking they might be on the spectrum, to transition to adulthood, to advocacy, to individuals with or IEPs, individualized educational programs, which is really important for people who have disabilities through school to get those resources and supports that they need. So lots of great information. The 3 that are listed here, and why I listed them, is because these are the 3 most frequently requested toolkits from Autism Speaks. The first one it's called the First 100-Day Toolkit. And we have two versions of that. We have one for children under 5, and because a lot of children get diagnosed very early, but many do not, really kind of depending on the presentation of the characteristics. There are also children who get diagnosed and in place what we call school age. So similar information, but more age appropriate and age relevant in both of these toolkits, and the school ages for ages 5 to 13. We also noticed through our Autism Response Team, and I'll talk a little bit about them in a second, that we were getting an increased inquiry to our Autism Response Team chats, emails, and phone calls for adults saying, I just got a diagnosis, or I think I might be getting a diagnosis. What do I do? Where do I start? What are my rights? Where do I go? And so we created a fantastic toolkit called If It Is Autism, or Is It Autism? And if so, what's next? A guide for adults. And it's really great because it walks, all of these guidebooks and these toolkits walk people through kind of step by step what they need to be doing. And it really just organizes information in a way that makes it accessible to people and understandable, because we know that this can be really overwhelming for individuals. So we have these wonderful toolkits. Again, these are just 3 examples of the 48 that we have that people access. These are all free and downloadable on our website at autismspeaks.org. We also have different kind of categories for these toolkits. We know that when a person with autism receives a diagnosis, it's not just that person, it's their entire family. And we want to make sure we're providing support for the entire family. So part of the family support suite of toolkits that we have one for parents that's wonderful. It's a parent's guide. We have one for grandparents, because we know grandparents can oftentimes play a significant role in a child or a young adult or adult's life on the autism spectrum. And then siblings, we can't forget about siblings, because they're also a very significant and important part of this whole picture. And so we have different, very specific toolkits and information and resources around those 3 groups. And then we also know that health and wellness is really important to this community as well. So we have a lot of people that report that sleep dysfunction is really common in the autism community. We know that people have a lot of times need to improve physical fitness, because sometimes they have more sedentary lifestyles. And so that just ideas to improve some physical fitness, because that's really important and leads to overall health, both physical and mental. We also know that a lot of times people with autism, because they have some sensory integration challenges, have issues with nutrition, because sometimes they can be picky eaters because of some of those sensory situations. And so we have a lot of great toolkits and information around nutrition and feeding and other different related challenges, and just again, a plethora of other resources. So you can go to autismspeaks.org/toolkit and look up any of these, and they're fantastic. So I talked a little bit about why we think it's so important to wrap supports around transition to adulthood. And you can see with those numbers that are changing every year, these numbers probably need to be updated as well. And since this is so new, but there's an estimated 70,000 teenagers now I'm thinking it's closer to 100 is what I'm reading. 100,000 teenagers that transition out of school-based services each year. So if a child and young adult is in a school-based system, they have an IEP. I think you guys probably know what IEPs are, the individualized educational programs that are supports for related services in school-based settings. All of those services stop once they transition out into, and those services are no longer available. In some states, I know here in Illinois and in most states it's 22. I know in Michigan, I believe it's 26 or 28. But all of those services stop, and so many people aren't prepared for that. So that's something that's really important for Autism Speaks, to make sure that we're educating and preparing not just people with autism and their families, but the educators out there who are providing these resources that need to know that this is a priority and it's not a choice. Transition to adulthood and transition plans are mandatory, and they need to be a part of the person's IEP. And so we also know that about half of 25-year-olds with autism have never held a paying job. And that is not because they don't want to or can't. It's because those opportunities are not as vast as we would like to see. So I'll talk a little bit about the employment initiatives that we're working on. And we also know that about 80% of adults with autism continue to live with their aging parents. Again, not because they can't live independently in some cases, but because there's really limited options for a diversity of housing and residential placements. So, and that doesn't mean, living in a residential facility. That means, living in a CILA or with someone who you're sharing an apartment with somebody who can come in and assist a couple times a week with some what we call instrumental activities of daily living and those kinds of things. So that is why this work is very important to us, because we realize that work has to be done and it's a priority that we have. So some of those toolkits that I mentioned before have been transitioned now into what we're calling roadmaps. And one of the topics is transition. So we have transition roadmaps available on our website in with three main topics. One is post-secondary education, because we know that many people on the autism spectrum go on to post-secondary education once they do transition away from those related services that they receive. We have one for housing and residential, and then one for meaningful employment. And I like that we put the word meaningful in there, because employment just means someone has a job. It means that they're working, and that's great. But we're really striving to make sure that opportunities and employment opportunities are meaningful for people. So it isn't just like you're checking a box and saying, yes, this person has a job. It's saying this person has meaningful work that is important to them, that they want to do and enjoy doing. The great thing about these roadmaps is they are customizable by levels of support. So when you go in and you pick one of these topics, you can also pick whether it's some support, moderate support, or intensive support. And then all the different resources and information will be around those different areas of the levels of support that are needed, which is great because it is such a spectrum and those support levels bring such different resources and information. So these are pretty new. We've developed these about a year ago. They're kind of hot off the presses. I love them. I think they're fantastic. I can spend hours sometimes on there just poking around and reading. So I would suggest that you guys check these out because they're really, really cool. So I mentioned employment. Employment is one of the areas that I work on mostly with my team and the outreach directors here, and there's myself and two other at Autism Speaks. And you can see here why this is so important, again, to Autism Speaks, because most autistic adults or adults with autism, we use those terms interchangeably because of a community-based assessment that we disseminated probably 2 years ago about person first versus identity first language. That was really important for us to know. And it actually kind of came back split down the middle, that some people with autism like to be called autistic or autistics or autistic people. And a lot of people said that they wanted to be a person with autism. So you'll hear Autism Speaks in language, in any communications that you see, use those terms interchangeably. But most autistic adults are either unemployed or underemployed. And this is anywhere from 50 to 75% in the United States. I've seen worldwide 80 to 90%. And underemployed is an important word because I'm going to explain a little bit what that means. And that's as an example of a young man that I worked with when I was doing direct service. He had 2 master's degrees and he was brilliant and he loved numbers and he loved accounting and he wanted to be an accountant. He was a CPA, he was certified and ready to do this, but he had such a hard time getting through the interview process that he didn't have opportunities to work in the field that he wanted to work in, because once he was there, he knew he would do great and excel, but he was having such a hard time and he didn't want to disclose his autism diagnosis, which is absolutely his right to do. He did not want to disclose it. And so he ended up working as a dishwasher. And there's nothing wrong with working as a dishwasher. That's a noble job and something that someone might enjoy. I've friends also with autism that I've worked with in the past who work as dishwashers and they love it. But this young man is considered underemployed because he has 2 master's degrees in a field that is meaningful work to him. And because he didn't want to disclose his diagnosis, and because he couldn't get through an interview process in a successful manner, he was underemployed and working in a kitchen. So I just wanted to use that as an example because that's really important, and that this is important work to us. We don't want people to feel like they have to disclose their diagnosis, not disclose their diagnosis or mask. Although again, that's a really personal decision. In a ideal world for me and for Autism Speaks, we want to create a culture where people feel comfortable saying, hey, I have autism. I'm on the autism spectrum. I'm autistic and I want this job, and help companies and organizations and businesses to understand what they can do to support someone with autism through that process. Because if you see this next one, more than half of young adults with autism remain unemployed and unenrolled in higher education opportunities in the first 2 years after high school. And if you look at the other charts here, you see that it fares far different statistics than a learning disability, than speech and language impairment, than intellectual disability. And we have to change these numbers. And I'm really, really excited to share with you the work that we've been doing in this space. Krista and I were in Iowa last week in Des Moines at the Capitol building, and we had an employment leadership summit. And, those are the kinds of things that we want to continue to do to make a difference in these statistics, because we don't like these. We want to change this and move the needle and shift this thinking in society so that people with autism and other neurodiversities have a fair opportunity and a meaningful employment. That's important to us. So Autism Speaks created something called WIN, and WIN is an employment initiative here, and it stands for Workplace Inclusion Now. And what this does is it brings together what we call 3 stakeholder groups. So people, communities, and employers. And those are really the 3 people that have to be involved in making this successful. So people with autism and related challenges that are ready and willing to work, that know that they want jobs, they have talent across industries, right? Because I think you guys maybe have heard that there are big companies that are very IT based, that do more tech kinds of jobs, which is fantastic. We want to cheer them on and make sure that work continues. So like S&P and Microsoft and JP Morgan and all those places are offering more STEM kind of opportunities or IT based jobs. That's great, but not every person with autism or related different conditions and neurodiversities are going to excel in that, nor do they want to work in that area. So we're trying to really provide opportunities, again, across the spectrum, throughout industries, so that people have their right to work in a place that's meaningful to them. That's really, really important. And then we bring together communities. And this Workplace Inclusion Now is really founded on the idea that by working together as a community, that we can make a different impact. So we're bringing together different individuals and organizations that provide support around employment and employment services for individuals with autism, that help them in finding jobs, applying for jobs, actually getting those positions, and then maintaining that position. Because a lot of people find a job and they work there, but because there's not an education piece for the organization, business, or company that the person with autism is working at, that kind of will sometimes fall through. And then we see a lot of turnover, there's a lack of retention, and we don't want to see that. So we want to help build those, that foundation for those community partners as well. And then employers. We need employers to come in, because we know that, I already said, there are a lot of individuals who are underemployed or unemployed on the autism spectrum, yet they have these amazing skill sets that would help them excel in a role that is meaningful to them. So we at Autism Speaks use Workplace Inclusion Now to help businesses who are committed to doing this, who are interested in doing this, who are raising their hands and saying, hey, I know that this is an untapped talent pool. I just need help to how to do this, because I want to do this and I want to do it well. And so we bring these 3 stakeholder groups together to make sure that we can create wraparound supports and, again, move the needle so we can find people jobs. And that's something that I'm really proud of and what I've been working on a lot the last year and a half. So I mentioned a little bit before that Autism Speaks has an Autism Response Team. We refer to them internally as ART, Autism Response Team acronym, and they are fantastic. These are some of the hardest working people at Autism Speaks. They are around the country, and they are specifically trained and have degrees, disability related degrees, working with the autism community. Most of them also have a personal connection to the mission. Some are parents, some are siblings, and they're wonderful. So these are these numbers again change almost monthly with how many individuals we provide direct assistance to. So this says 460,000 people by direct assistance, and these individuals take phone calls all day because a lot of people want to call and ask questions and look for resources. Some people don't want to engage in a conversation over the phone. They would prefer email. So we have a dedicated email line. We also have a new feature on our website that's a live chat. So people can go on to the live chat and ask questions in real time, which is fantastic. And again, this is a hotline that's a resource and information hotline that's really open to anyone. So we do have a lot of families that call us. We have people with autism that contact us. We have a lot of caregivers, teachers, other professionals that work in this field and community members that are looking for different resources. So some of the things that ART or the Autism Response Team can help with are where to get a diagnosis. Some people don't even know where to start or how to start. People call us and ask about special education services in schools in their area and advocacy and support. We have a lot of people, especially in probably the last 2 to 3 years, inquire more about adult resources and adult services. Where do I go? What kind of opportunities are there for post-secondary education? What about employment? What about housing in my community? There's also, especially during COVID, we had a lot of calls related to that and shifting from programming in person to being at home. What kinds of community services are available now that we're kind of turning a little bit more of a corner on COVID? What kind of activities are out there in my area, and much more. These are just a couple of different topics that the Autism Response Team associates help with. So how can you contact them? They're available Monday through Friday from 9 to 5 in all time zones. So you can call them at 888-AUTISM-2, and numerically that's 888-288-4762. We also have Spanish speaking associates who are fantastic. So you can call a direct line and reach a Spanish speaking associate at 888-772-9050. Again, that email, if people don't want to have a conversation, and sometimes people do not, they just want to email. And so the email address is help@autismspeaks.org. And then again, the live chat is actually on our landing page at autismspeaks.org. In the lower right-hand corner, there's a little gold bubble that's a chat bubble. And you can contact people that way as well. They're wonderful people and do such great work for us. So thank you guys for listening. I'm going to turn it over now to Krista, and she's going to talk to you about some really impressive things that we do through advocacy. And Krista, you could just tell me to advance it when you need me to.
Super.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Colleen. So good to be with you this morning. And like I said before, my name is Krista Stevens, and I work out of Dallas. I'm the Director of State Government Affairs, and I have the honor of helping with state advocacy in Minnesota. So I take it upon myself to know what's going on in your state for the autism community and what would make the state better for the autism community. So I am always interested in partnering with you and your organization so that we can make things better. And this is my daughter, Eleanor. She is 17, I can't believe. she is there. You see, this is during COVID, so she's working at home with an iPad doing speech therapy, which some of you might have done that before. You know what that's like. It's different than when you're with your therapists one-on-one, but I know that you've probably learned that it's better than not having access to these opportunities during the pandemic. So she's adapted, and I know you all have adapted as well. And we look forward to being face-to-face with our favorite people pretty soon, hopefully. So Eleanor is my inspiration, and I turn my attention from her and all of the advocacy work I do for her as an individual with autism, and I turn that energy to these priorities, which are part of Autism Speaks focus for the organization. And I won't read them all to you, but I think they're probably pretty familiar to you as being important aspects of what makes a community great for individuals with disabilities. And one thing that we're so proud of especially is the increased funding that we and other advocacy groups have been able to get for home and community-based services. And we're especially looking forward to the Senate in Washington, D.C. passing the Build Back Better legislation, because it has close to $200 billion for HCBS, which is the home and community-based services specifically for adults. So we've been working on that, and other organizations have been, and we know that it's important to make sure that the problems of being an adult without resources when you're disabled need to be addressed through your local community. So we also spend a lot of time in Washington working with Congress to increase funding for research, because a lot of times in order to get access to grants and other programs, you need to be able to point to research to show that those grants and programs are going to be effective. And so we've been working most recently on what's called the Autism Cares Act of 2019, and it is setting aside billions of dollars to look at research. And the focus is not trying to figure out what causes autism. The focus is what would make autistics' lives better? What would they benefit from in their community? How would their family better be able to support them? How could they contribute more to their community? And so that's what most of our research is really built around, how to improve people's lives on a day-to-day basis. For many, many years, Colleen mentioned we turned 15. For many years, we worked to make sure that if you were autistic, your insurance, your health insurance, could not exclude the treatments that would help you from their benefits. And that happened a lot, actually. And we had to go state by state by state. And that's why the whole country is green here, because as we got laws passed in each state to tell the insurance companies that they had to cover interventions and treatments for those with autism, like speech therapy and like OT and like counseling. As we worked on that, we turned the state green. And eventually now we have the whole country green, which means everyone across the country, if they have an autism diagnosis, their insurance should cover treatments and interventions for an autism diagnosis to treat autism. Now, I promise you that there are insurance companies that try to get away with not doing that. And sometimes they forget their obligation to provide these benefits. And so one of the things we do is help individuals who contact us and they say, we're trying to get speech therapy for my daughter, or I'm trying to get counseling for myself, and I'm being told that I don't have that or I can't get that because of the autism. We can help you one-on-one and help you figure out what's going on and how to make sure that the benefit that you're entitled to through your health insurance actually comes to fruition. You actually get a chance to use that benefit. So please contact us if you need some help in that department, and we're happy to help you. This is another area that we've worked on for many years, and I want the whole country to turn blue here because this is our map that shows whether or not children who get a diagnosis with autism, and when I say children, I actually mean all the way up to age 22. Children who get a diagnosis or young adults are supposed to be able to count on their state Medicaid program for treatment and for therapies for that autism diagnosis. Because Medicaid is an entitlement program, the states have only responded slowly to the requirement that they provide that service. And look at me down in Texas, the pink state, one of the pink states there. Texas is going to be the very last state to actually cover its children with autism through its Medicaid program, which is totally embarrassing. I don't know why the state has been so reluctant to provide this type of support, but we are looking forward to it next year, February of 2022. There's other states there that are pink, and that means, well, Illinois and New York, they really are gold now. We should turn them gold because the gold states are the ones that have passed the legislation to cover autism, but they're not doing a very good job of it. And so we're on top of those states trying to remind those legislators of their obligation. So you'll see there, Minnesota's in blue, so y'all are in the clear, which means that your state is one of the states that's fulfilling its obligation to provide Medicaid benefits to individuals, to children with autism, if they're Medicaid eligible. But please reach out to us if you know of gaps in that program, or if you think there's improvements that are necessary for how Medicaid responds to autistic children and young adults in your state. Some more work that we do is for students, individuals who are in school, in public school, and have an autism diagnosis. And then, as Colleen mentioned, as individuals, as those students get ready to go into the adult world of working and college perhaps, or maybe living on their own, all of those things, we want to make sure that there's a plan for how those individuals enter the world of adulthood. And then there's methods that can support them in their work, in their adult life. And so a lot of our focus is to get the states to start planning for transition by age 14. We want to see investment in research to show what types of transition strategies help students get ready for the world of adulthood. And we want to make sure that all of that is aligned with the federal rules of IDEA, which are the laws that protect the rights of individuals who have disabilities while they're students. So we want to make sure that all of those programs for school students, as well as transition to adults, protect the rights of individuals who have disabilities through IDEA. And then, like Colleen mentioned, we are not going to just stop looking at solutions for children and young adults. We want to see a world where adults all the way up into their elderly years who have autism continue to get the help that they need and the support that they need locally. And like for an example there, under safety resources, we have been part of different strategies that some states have chosen to figure out how to keep individuals who are vulnerable, like people with disabilities or autism, how to keep them safe. And so one thing that we saw just recently down in Florida is that we saw something called the purple alert. And the purple alert is sort of like an amber alert or a silver alert some states have. And you might have had your phone start buzzing or ringing when one of these alerts goes through. And it basically means that there's a child, if it's an amber alert, there's a child who is lost or cannot be located where they're supposed to be. And so the amber alert goes out and it lets everyone know that to look out for this specific individual. And so to make sure they're safe. Well, Florida knows that it's not just children who can be lost or can wander or be away from their safe place. It can also be individuals with disabilities like autism or other types of disabilities. And they created a purple alert, it's called. And basically, it's the same thing as an amber alert. It goes out throughout the whole state, and it tells people this specific individual named, his or her name, this is what he or she looks like, this is the last place that he or she was seen, and we think that this person might be in danger. And so then everybody can pay attention to their local area and see, is that person around and can I help get that person back to safety? And so we were part of the initiative in Florida to get that legislation passed because we know how important it is for vulnerable adults to be safe. Financial planning is important to us, and we know that many individuals with autism and other disabilities have very complex systems of financial support they get. They might be eligible from benefits from Social Security. They might be eligible from benefits from their local family or community. There might be funds set aside for them in different ways. And we want to make sure that individuals with disabilities don't end up losing access to benefits because of financial planning mistakes or perhaps missteps. And so we have been involved in what's called the ABLE Act, which creates a way for families to set aside money without being taxed so that they can direct that money towards their family member with disabilities. And it's a very safe and also efficient way of saving because you don't have to pay any taxes on it. And so this legislation is through the national government, but every state has adopted this. And so we try to educate families about this method of saving for the family members that have disabilities so that those resources don't run out and so that they don't lose access to any state or federal benefits that could possibly help them. So the world has changed a lot in the past, close to 2 years now with COVID. And we know that everything was transformed to making sure that people were safe during the pandemic. And so we focused our attention on making sure that there was emergency relief for the communities that were now helping those with autism during the pandemic. And we worked on specific legislation in what's called the American Rescue Plan that was passed in Washington, D.C. And all of those funds then were sent out to the states so that the states could help all the different agencies and the hospitals and the different providers and the schools all respond to the changes that the pandemic required. And that third thing on the list there, telehealth services. So you might have encountered telehealth. You saw my daughter Eleanor getting her speech therapy through telehealth. Telehealth is pretty new to many of us because before the pandemic, if we wanted to have speech therapy, we could go to our speech therapist's office, or maybe he or she could come to us. But then during the pandemic, it got a lot more complicated. And so we were involved in helping make sure that health insurance provided a way for providers like speech therapists to get paid if they provided therapy through the iPads or the computers or whatever way, the television screens that they were doing to connect with their patients. And we're happy that a lot of those telehealth flexibilities are actually going to stay around, even though we're moving away from the pandemic. We're excited because a lot of good results were seen during the pandemic, showing that telehealth was an effective way for people to get access to their health care. We could not do this alone. Colleen and I could not, and even though Autism Speaks has, I think close to 100, maybe a little over 100 employees all over the country, we rely on volunteers to help us. And you might have seen us raise money through our Autism Speaks walks. Some of you might have walked with us before, or some of you might have donated when somebody else is walking with us. But we also find ways to ask for people's help through their volunteering. And we know that people with autism and their families are able to change the hearts and minds of those in positions of power. And when I say that, I mean the legislators and the state leaders, the governor and the lieutenant governor, and your mayor in your local town, and your county commissioner and your board of special education. All of those folks can really understand what we need if people with autism are willing to speak up and share their story. And so we have 3 different ways that we encourage folks to help us. Number 1, if you're on Facebook or on Twitter or on Instagram, you can go to Autism Votes, which is our tag, and you can sign up to see all of our posts, and then you can share them when the new ones come out. Share them with your connections and your families and contacts. You can also join what's called our Grassroots Advocacy Network. And this is an opportunity for people to get emails once in a while, and it'll say, hey, we really need you to send an email to your state legislator and tell him or her why this legislation would help you. And we have a form that's all filled out. You just need to fill in your name and your zip code, and your state legislator gets that email and learns that you are a constituent, you're a voter in their community, and that this matters to you. And so the Grassroots Advocacy Network is another way for you to get involved and become a voice for those with autism. And when Colleen sends this presentation out, any of these words that are underlined are links. And so you'll be able to use those links to sign up to be part of our grassroots network. And then the last thing, the last thing is what are called our ambassadors. And our ambassadors are awesome because they are people who actually apply to the program, and they raise their hand and they say, I am willing to be a voice for those with autism in my local community. And they end up getting matched with one of the legislators from their local area, and they become the contact with that legislator for the world of autism. And so they are the ones that stop by and visit that legislator's office and talk to the staff members, and even have an opportunity to come to DC and come to Capitol Hill and to work with other ambassadors across the country on making the world a better place for autism. The ambassador program has an application that you submit, and it takes about, I'd say about 2 hours a month is what it requires, because we have a monthly meeting through Zoom, and then usually there's some homework where the person does some outreach to their local legislator. So if you're interested in being one of our ambassadors, we would love to have you contact us. And it could be an individual with autism. It can be someone who needs the support of a caregiver or a family member to partner with them. Or it can be a family member on their own. They can be an ambassador. It can be someone who works with people who are autistic. We welcome all of the above to our ambassador program. And I'm excited to share those opportunities with you today, because I know that you all are dedicated to the same mission that we are. Okay, you guys, we are open for business. Tell us what you're interested in and what you have questions about.
First of all, thank you. Wow, both of you, wonderful presentations. So much information was packed in there, very exciting. We do have a list we have 10 minutes. We have a big list of questions that we've been working on. I also want to make it open to people who have questions that came up.
You bet.
You bet. Go ahead, Troy. Why don't you kick us off, Troy?
I'm firing
and
off
we'll bounce
right
back
now.
and forth between you and the list and some that are running through my
I'm
head.
firing off right now.
Okay, fire it off, Troy.
Thanks for letting me know that. Are you able to work with people with seizures?
Are you able to work with people with seizures?
Yeah.
And maybe how does
Seizure.
seizure disorders impact with autism?
That's what I'm trying to say.
So
Do you mean for our ambassador program, or do you mean for employment?
For anything like ambassador employment or employment, whatever you want.
Okay,
How do you-
Colleen, you want to start?
yeah,
Colleen?
so we're not considered a direct service provider like some community partners are. So we don't necessarily, like Krista and I don't go out and provide direct services in the communities other than planning these events, doing these presentations. But there are so many individuals with autism that also have seizure disorder of some sort that we do have a lot of resources around that. And so, and like I said, I think the statistics are up to 70% of adolescents develop some sort of seizure disorder if they have a diagnosis of autism. And I know that that's been true in my work. I had to learn a lot about seizures when I was working directly in the communities when I worked at Easter Seals. So, you know, we would certainly not turn someone away who had a seizure disorder and didn't have a diagnosis of autism, because we know a lot of times those go hand in hand. So a lot of the resources, all the resources that we have actually are really not just specific to autism, but really specific to a lot of different related conditions. So I think that you would find that if you started looking up some of the stuff that I was talking about too. That's a good question.
Awesome. Troy, and thank you. Let's see.
Yeah.
Now I want to bring up one from our list. Oh my gosh, so many too. I think that the first one I want to ask is just to get this one in is this: how can we as an organization, as individuals, you've already mentioned the Autism Votes and Grassroots Advocacy Network and volunteer ambassador. How can we work with Autism Speaks to support families with and people with autism? Also, the workplace inclusion now. That sounds very interesting to me, and how we could work together to kind of advocate for that, because that's very important to us too.
Krista, do you want to take the first part and I'll do the second?
Sure.
Okay.
So yeah, those three methods that I listed out, the you know, participating in social media, the grassroots advocacy, the ambassador program, you can feel free to get a graphic from me that you could include in your newsletters, or you could retweet some of our posts. You can have a booth at our walks. You can participate in our webinars where we have educational events. We have a calendar on our website that goes through what our classes are and our live events, and you all can participate in those and dial in and hear about some of the educational issues that we put out. We also have what's called a Pathways program, Pathways to Employment program, and it's a program, a day, about a couple hours, and it is around that whole Workplace Inclusion Now program. It's scheduled for different areas of the country at different times. I don't know when the next one is for Minnesota, but that would be an example of a more direct focus on understanding the employment space. Colleen, do you know anything about the schedule for that program?
I do. And so we're not going to do just a separate one for Minnesota. We are going to hopefully include them in what's called the Upper Midwest market or area. And right now I'm based in Chicago. So that includes Illinois, Wisconsin, and Minnesota is considered our Upper Midwest market and area. So we're going on March 31st. The plan is to try to attempt to do something hybrid. So not like what we did in Iowa, where we had a 6-hour event. It was a pretty much all day event. And then we were streaming what we were doing on a virtual platform. It might be flipped because we want to include those 3 different states. So we can't be in all 3 different states at the same time because we just don't have the bandwidth to do that. But these Pathways events that Krista was referencing are about 2 to 3 hours long. They bring those different stakeholder groups together of people, communities, and employers to talk about how we can do this. And WIN, or Workplace Inclusion Now, is actually a program that Autism Speaks is building out. It's not yet complete, but it's something that we're building. There are training modules that are involved in Workplace Inclusion Now. I didn't really get into a lot of that, but we have different training modules. We actually have one that's called Navigating a Workplace, and it's a self-advocacy. It's for self-advocates that can take that, and we provide scholarships for that. There's a training module for HR departments and supervisors. There's one for people working alongside people on the autism spectrum or with different neurodiversities, and one for vocational rehab, because we find that a lot of vocational rehab programs don't have a full, complete, and really strong understanding around the country of what autism is and what autism is not. So we have training modules for that. We also have, these were all created by people with autism that Autism Speaks employs. We also have a consultative piece to WIN, and that's led by our employment team. One of person which is on the autism spectrum herself. She'll go into companies and she'll work with their HR department. She'll look at their hiring practices, their onboarding practices, what accommodations they're making, if any, and make suggestions for how to make that work environment across the board a more inclusive workplace for people with autism and other, like I said, related challenges. And that's pretty important work too. And then we have a training component where we're either doing in-person training, if we can, depending on where we are in the United States, with the company that's contacting us and saying they want to do this. We do train everybody, and from the top to the bottom and the bottom up. So the CEO all the way down to the person that's answering the phones, and then all the way back up. Everyone receives training, and then it's ongoing, and they can have training through those modules as well. So if some person is new and they're a new employee and they haven't heard about Workplace Inclusion Now and what that company is doing, they can take those different courses. And then lastly, one of the things that we are working on that will hopefully be complete within a year is the job sourcing platform. So it's a place where people with autism and related challenges can go similarly like they would to LinkedIn and find companies, organizations, businesses of all sizes, all industries that are wanting to do this work, that are partners of ours, that want to hire people on the spectrum because they know what amazing individuals they are and what kind of talent pool that is and what kind of skill sets that they can bring to work. So that's kind of what WIN is in a nutshell. March 31st will bring that event together. And like I said, the plan right now is to include the entire upper Midwest. So there will be, you know, probably a business represented that we have partnered with to either be an autism friendly designated program or a full-blown WIN partner. This is a pretty new program for us. We're just kind of getting it off the ground. But just for us to talk more about it and to talk to the employment team about the work that we're doing and why it's so important. And like I said, the whole point of this is so we have to hear those stories about the young man that I worked with who had 2 master's degrees and wasn't working in meaningful work because he was having a hard time understanding if he should disclose and then telling his employer, these are the accommodations I need, which he would have every right to under ADA and EEOC laws. We don't want that to even be a question, you know, in the future. We want everybody to feel comfortable, and we want businesses to be supportive, and we want to support businesses so that we can do this and do it well and really utilize best practices. So if you guys wanted to participate in the March 31st event, the beautiful thing about it is that we know that 3 hours is kind of a long time to cut out of your morning or your afternoon, whenever we decide to do it. But this is all streamed on a platform that we use called Excel Events. So all you have to do is register. And then if you can't attend the entire thing or you can't attend at all, if you're registered, you'll get a link to the recording of the entire session, and you can access that for up to 30 days after the event is concluded. And so you can go back and watch the keynote. You can go back and watch any of the breakout sessions. You can go through, if we have an expo booth, which we often have at these events, it's really a great feature. So I would say if you guys want to learn more about WIN and kind of see a Pathways event, we would love to have you included in our March 31st event. I don't have the exact time yet or the exact structure because it's a couple months away. Fortunately, you don't have time to plan that, but I think it'd be really interesting for you guys to participate in, and we'd love to have you.
That'd be great. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. I think we have time for one more question. Dana.
Yep.
Go ahead, Dana. Dana, what's your question?
Go ahead.
I want to ask, guys, you had a toy has seizures. It's scary sometimes.
Oh, you want to talk? Yeah. Seizures.
Yeah,
You know what,
scary. Yeah.
Dana? I think you were with me when we were talking about, because you had one of the questions on here asking them about the sensory friendly Santa Claus.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Can you guys tell us a little bit about your work with sensory friendly events and sensory friendly Santa Claus, since we're here?
Yeah, sure. Well, this is was put on the back burner last year because of COVID. But around the country in different areas, we have a sensory friendly Santa and a sensory friendly bunny. And so I believe if you go to our website and you just put in the search engine sensory friendly Santa, you'll see the locations where they are. It's a great program. It's not just about providing that opportunity for a person with autism or their families to be able to do that. It's really, again, about raising that awareness and raising that understanding and acceptance, because we provide training to all the Santas so that they understand what kind of challenges people with autism might be facing, why these opportunities are so important for not just the person with autism, but their family, because they might not otherwise have that opportunity. We've also partnered in different markets around the country and just done different things with, like here in Chicago, the Joffrey Ballet. They actually received a grant from Autism Speaks. One of the things that we didn't talk about was our grant programs. We actually provide grants to other nonprofit organizations, and in some cases for profit, depending on the structure of the grant, to provide programming or begin programming or enhance programming for people with autism. And so here in Chicago, the Joffrey Ballet received funding, and they did an entire sensory friendly Nutcracker. They also did it up in Milwaukee at the Milwaukee Ballet, something similar. But here in Chicago, they also started classes for ballerinas that were on the autism spectrum, young girls, and was like a mentoring program, which was really cool. So we have a lot of different sensory stuff, sensory friendly activities that can be found on our website. Like I said, we took a hiatus last year because of COVID. So we're starting to come back in person with those safety measures in place, depending on where that you are in the country. But you can find that information at autismspeaks.org and just put in sensory friendly Santa.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you both
All right.
so much. We've gone past our time for our class. This was so awesome. I know that I see a bunch more hands up. Is it okay if I email you and stay in touch and pass along some questions?
Sure.
Awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Fabulous. Fabulous. And I'm looking forward to it. Definitely interested in the pathways to employment.
Yeah.
And the ambassadors, all this stuff. Thank you guys so much. And we'll be in touch.
Yeah, thanks to the wonderful class for your questions and your participation and willingness to want to learn about Autism Speaks and all the great work that we do. We appreciate it.